Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and I read scripts on ShawNshawNacting.com. Today we're going to review The Marksman. So this is a film by RobertLorenz. He's one of the writers as well, so you have that nice director-writer combination. I think he had two co-writers to kind of help him out, build out the story. You have Liam Neeson as Jim, kind of this rancher on the Texas border with Mexico. Jacob Perez plays Miguel, this little boy who's brought from Mexico into the U.S. with a smuggler. Teresa Ruiz plays Rosa, his mother. Sean Rosales plays Hernando, this local cartel crew that's kind of hunting down Jim. Kathryn Winnick plays Sarah, who's the border patrol, one of the police there, and also the stepdaughter of Jim. The young mother gets a call from the uncle, and the cartel is after him. And he's like, you gotta go, leave immediately, go to the border. And she's like, all right, fine, pack up, boom. And they're out the door. And they have some kind of plan, but you don't know what the plan is. She takes off to the border. Next thing you know, he's hanging from a bridge, by the local cartel, and they're like, we're gonna get this guy. And they go through his phone book, like, boom, oh, he has this person, he's called Rosa. So they track her down. They're like, oh, she's obviously left, and she's at the border, and Jim's just minding his business, trying to pay his bills off, and he's severely in debt because his wife had cancer. So he's, his house is heavily indebted, a huge mortgage payment. He's at the end of his life. He doesn't really have a lot of money to pay, so there's not much he can do. He calls in all these people. He runs the border all the time, so he always calls in if people need water. He brings out water, but then he calls them in if he helps them get arrested. So he's kind of like on the fence, like you don't know if he's a good guy, a bad guy. He's kind of very neutral down the middle. So that's kind of interesting because normally I saw a film last year and it was just terrible. It was shot from the Mexican viewpoint, and these guys were kind of crossing the border for a better life, and this guy's just on the border just psychopath killing him. You're like, dude, this is insane. But it's interesting because it's kind of like a different stereotype. This one plays a stereotype, the cartel is the most evil thing in the world, which cartels are pretty bad, but then he's like kind of the white savior kind of hero. It's very similar to a lot of Liam Neeson films where it's like kind of taken, redone, like this is like Taken 20 or something. Just a different cut of it, where he's kind of the savior or the hero hunting down the gang, but this time it's the opposite, they're hunting him. So it's kind of interesting to see the tables turn where he has to use his skills to outwit a gang chasing him, and the gang has all the resources they need, tons of money, they have a computer network, they can trace people, but he lives off the grid basically, so it's very difficult to trace a guy down that's off the grid. He doesn't have a cell phone. I'm like, how are they going to catch this guy once he starts paying in cash? Because they were kind of tracing him down with a credit card, and then he realizes they're after him with the credit card, and is like, dude, they're never going to catch him with cash only, right? So then it's kind of interesting how they still kind of figure out where he's going. Another part of the story is Hernando is kind of the leader of this local cartel crew, and they kind of hunt people down working for the head cartel, obviously, and he's the local crew member. And they trace down Rosa's uncle, and they kill him, and they're hunting them down. They almost kill them right at the border, and then Jim rescues them, and then they're chasing him the whole time. And as they go into America to cross the border, Hernando's kind of looking around. He's seeing this, like, they're in this gang and they're setting up an operation. He looks out the window and there's someone mowing their lawn with their kids, and he's like, man, if I could have. He's seeing what he's missing out in life, but he doesn't feel like he has a choice. He always felt like the only way out of poverty in Mexico was to join the local cartel gang, and then now he's in the cartel gang. They'll kill him if he leaves, so he doesn't feel like he has a choice in life. He just like constantly, so he has this theme of never having a choice in life. He took the only way out that seemed possible to survive, and now he's having to live with that, but he thinks he's a badass, but then kind of he breaks down over time. It's his crew members keeps getting slaughtered. He's like, maybe he's having second thoughts, like maybe this wasn't the best life to choose. So it's kind of interesting. The character arc is really on the villain side, I would say, more than on Liam's character, although a lot happens to him as well. Like they burn his ranch down and they burn all the money, which is crazy. I don't know why you burn all the money after you go through all that hell, but they shoot his dogs. He's having a bad life. Like he literally has nothing left in his life, and then his truck catches on fire. He's like had no possessions left, and the whole reason to do this trip with the money, then he could pay off his ranch, but then they burn his ranch down. So it's kind of a weird thing where you destroy the money. I mean, symbolically in a film it works. In reality, I don't know if you'd burn the money. I mean, even if it's tainted, it's like you got a better life shot ahead in life. It's like money is money, and at the end of the day it corrupts. But I don't know, it's kind of an interesting message. I know people that have won the lottery and it kind of corrupted the whole family, so I kind of get that parallel. Like money is the source of all evil, but I don't think people are going to relate that. It's from the fan base. They're going to be like, no, you burned that money. Like they're throwing literally hundreds into fire, and probably a little shocking. Obviously, they know the rest of it's fake, but it looks like the first 200s are real, right? So they wasted 200, and then the rest is kind of fake bills, obviously. But that's kind of a nice hit. I mean, the other thing you could say is there's probably a lot of critiques, like this is kind of a stereotypical film. There's been a lot of kind of white savior, like they saved the minority somehow in America, like you had Green Book, this dumb mafia guy saving this black musician from the South, and then now you have Liam Neeson saving this Mexican family from certain death of the cartels. So it's a stereotype they play over and over in Hollywood. They could have swapped it out with like a Mexican-American, say, actor, but I don't think it would have the marketing pull. So by having two sides of the story and two audiences, you're capturing a little bit of the Latino audience, and you're probably capturing a lot of the majority of the audience in the States. So, I don't know how you would play that out. And it's not unrealistic that you'd have a white rancher right on the border. I mean, the reason why Texas split off from Mexico mainly was the white ranchers that moved into Texas, and they wanted slavery, and the Mexicans had already freed the slaves, so they fought Mexico to steal Texas just so they could have slavery. So that's kind of the legacy of Texas. It's based on white ranchers moving in and taking the land from the original Mexican, Spanish settlers that had owned the land, and they slowly just usurped them from the land, and so they didn't have anything. And that's why they're kind of poor laborers nowadays, because that's all that remains, because they took all the good land holdings and everything away from them earlier. Otherwise, you'd have a huge, rich, Mexican-American dynasty there if they hadn't have done that. Another part in the film is, the cartel has these deep pockets of money, and they're literally able to buy anyone off the local police, and then they cross the border, they're able to buy off the border patrol, and you're like, I don't know if you're going to cross the border patrol, but I guess it's possible you'd have some corrupt, as long as you knew which officer and which line to cross when you cross the border. So that was kind of interesting, and they actually corrupt a local sheriff, which I think it's more believable than the border patrol, but the border patrol is going to be facing drug cartels daily, so yeah, it's kind of interesting dichotomy there, because some police are corrupted by the drug trade, but you're like, is it that many? So it's kind of like, what's the balance in the film? But I think it's fairly realistic in that sense. There would be a lot of police kind of involved in this. So if you just find one or two bad guys out of the whole force, then yeah, you'd have that possibility. Another commentary is kind of the fence they show is the old fence before the Trump fence. So it has this old rusting fence, and it's kind of falling apart. And it's kind of symbolic of a little bit of the Trump presidency kind of in decline. It built this big wall, but it didn't really lead to a success, in the election. I don't think he won many people over that weren't his hardcore supporters. Yeah, they're like, oh, you built the wall, but for most people that didn't want the wall, I just thought it was dumb, because if you look historically, every wall is crossed. You got Hadrian's Wall in England's been crossed. You have the Maginot Line in France, didn't stop the Nazis, they just went around the wall. You have the Chinese Wall, they built it like a 2,000-mile border fence, huge, the biggest badass border wall ever. And the Mongolians got into China anyway and took over all of China briefly. So, all these walls don't work. So this kind of just shows it in a dramatic way. So yeah, it's kind of symbolically, just subtly a little bit about how you build a border wall, and it really doesn't impact the culture. The local culture is going to be what it is. Yeah, it's kind of like this artificial device that divides countries in some areas where there is a drastic change. Like if you go to the U.S.-Canada border, for a long time there was no fence. I think now they built a fence maybe, but they just mowed like a 20-foot lawn and said call it a day, because basically the countries are more or less on parity wealth-wise, so there's not really a big need for people to legally cross. But in Mexico, U.S., you have this huge, Mexico's had all these corrupt politicians, and they had the PRI forever, and so they've had all these terrible corrupt politicians siding up with business, and there's a lot of corruption in that society, so people just don't get ahead in life. The top people on the top stay in the top and get real richer, and the poor just stay poor, so you have this real dichotomy of the poor rich. And if you ever go to Mexico, you'll see some of the drastic things, especially say in Mexico City. You'll see the top of Mexico City, people are living in cinder blocks with TV antennas, and you're like, I saw that in the 2000s, maybe now they've switched to cable, but that was just drastic, because we lost the TV antennas went down in the 90s, so it's literally 20 years behind. And then you go to the south side of Mexico City, it literally looks like one of the rich neighborhoods of Beverly Hills, except with the tons of guards and with huge walls to protect people. So it's really this bizarre kind of culture where you have a really extreme riches and real extreme poverty, and there's no kind of really good middle class background a lot of times. So it's kind of like, you're like, feel to the culture. Obviously the States has now, unfortunately, with you see the homelessness in California or New York, it's kind of sliding into the same direction, which is scary. You're just like, how does this happen in America? You know, like when I grew up, I don't remember that much homeless, but who knows? You know, maybe it's just a trend and it goes in waves. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good film. I think I'd recommend it. I wouldn't say it's like a collector film. I wouldn't buy this in my collection and watch it several times, but you know, for a one-watch film, I think it's pretty good. Hopefully you guys like it, and you can subscribe. If you like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.